So welcome to this video with me, and I wanted to make this video because I wanted to put into a very simple and concise and straightforward way the real basics of the teaching. So in video number 1, which is called the basic principles of the teaching, I talked about sort of the basic or foundational principles of not only the teaching but of the awakened view itself. And so in this video I really want to talk about the application of those teachings, because really the application of any spiritual teaching is the most important part of the teaching. In other words, the application answers the question of what's the doing of the teaching? What can I do to help myself to awaken from the egoic state of consciousness to the awakened state of consciousness, the spirit, the consciousness of awakened spirit. And so in this video I want to talk about, in the most basic way I can, really about three applications of these teachings. And the first application is very, very simple, but it's actually very profound and important to get a feel of, and most importantly to apply. And the first one is to be still. Now, what does it mean to be still? This sort of teaching, this simple spiritual teaching of be still, has been around for a very long time. And people have understood this teaching in different ways. But in terms of the way I teach, I have a very specific way of describing what be still really means. And what be still really means is to allow everything to be as it is. That's what the application of being still means. Usually when people try to be still, say you try to meditate, and you're trying to become still, you're trying to still your mind, you're trying to find a place of stillness or peace or serenity, and people generally do that through some sort of discipline, some form of inner control. I call it manipulation. And I call it manipulation, which is sort of a strong word, but I call it manipulation because that's really what it is. And so, in order to be still, to find a true stillness, an authentic stillness, the true stillness, the authentic stillness, is not something that's contrived. It's not something that is found and maintained by any form of control or manipulation. True stillness is your natural state. True stillness isn't something that needs to be created by you. True stillness is more something you notice, that there is a pre-existing stillness. In other words, it's still already. Your true nature is already perfectly still, perfectly at ease. You may not be aware of it. When our minds are caught within themselves, when we're identified with being an ego, then we think stillness is something I have to attain. Stillness is something I have to make happen. But as I said in the first video about the basic principles of the teaching, is that really you and I, we are not egos. Ego is just something that's created in the mind. It's a pattern of thinking. And when we begin to open to the possibility of seeing that we aren't the ego, that the ego or the mind is something that happens within you, then there becomes space. The ego is basically repetitive patterns of thinking. So in that sense, it's noise. It's just internal mental noise. But this noise arises within stillness. Stillness is a quality of your essential nature. Your essential nature is spirit. Spirit is ineffable. Spirit is something without form or shape or color, but nonetheless exists, and exists in a vibrant and very alive way. So your true nature is really, actually spirit. My true nature is spirit. Everybody's true nature is essentially spirit. And spirit is already still. Now, one of the qualities of spirit is allowing everything to be as it is. That's what conscious spirit is doing. Or I should say, that's one of the things it's doing. But that's not really much of a doing at all. To allow everything to be as it is doesn't require you to do anything. What it does require is that you stop doing. Let go of the incessant and compulsive need to do. Because all of the doing is nothing more than a way of not allowing everything to be as it is. And as long as we're not allowing everything to be as it is, it's very, very difficult to awaken from the egoic state of consciousness. So this very fundamental teaching of allow everything to be as it is extraordinarily important. And for a lot of people, it's quite challenging to really allow everything to be as it is. Because the ego is afraid of this. The ego thinks if it allows everything to be as it is, either something terrible is going to happen, or nothing's going to happen at all. But neither of these things ends up actually being the truth. When you allow everything to be, something extraordinary begins to occur. So as you're listening to me and watching me right now, if in the act of listening and watching me, if you were just to allow everything to be, in other words, for the moment, don't analyze it, don't put what I'm saying into your conditioned mind, compare it with other things you've heard or read, just allow it to be heard. Later, if you want, you can accept it or reject it on your own terms. But so even as we are here together, is it possible for you to allow this moment to completely be as it is? And what happens when you allow everything to be as it is? Really, to allow things to be as they are, it's not something you try to do. As I said, to try to allow everything to be is counterproductive. You can't actually accomplish this by trying. It's more a state of relaxing, letting be, letting go. But to allow everything to be as it is also one part of the teaching that I find people misunderstand the most. A lot of people become afraid of allowing everything to be because they equate it with some sort of inactivity, some way in which one would become disengaged from life, from existence, from what's happening. Some way in which people are afraid if they allowed everything to be, then they wouldn't be able to respond to life in a wise and appropriate way. But this is to misunderstand the teaching. To allow everything to be as it is not a goal. It's not an end. It's a foundation. It's the foundation from which true and wise action takes place. A way of responding to the moment, or to life, or to the most common daily situations you find yourself in, can actually arise from this foundation of allowing everything to be. Because it's not until you really are allowing everything to be that you're actually out of the egoic state of consciousness. As long as you're struggling with what is, with this moment, with what arises in this moment, as long as you're at battle with what is, then you can never go beyond your conditioned way of seeing and perceiving things. You can never go beyond the egoic state of consciousness. So think of allowing everything to be as it is as more of a foundation from which insight can happen and true and wise activity can spring from. A true and wise response to life that comes from spirit rather than from ego. Now, to allow everything to be as it is also a definition of meditation, of the meditation in the way that I teach it. It's not only about meditation. You can allow anything to be as it is. And if you do that, you'll find that there's new and creative and wise ways to respond to events in your life that you may not have imagined before. But in terms of meditation, again, many people, their notion of meditation is really some form of control, some form of manipulation. But we really don't get to the natural state, which is what spiritual enlightenment is. It's discovering the natural state. We don't get to the natural state by controlling ourselves. We don't get to the natural state by unnatural means, by means of inner manipulation and control. We get to the natural state by allowing everything to naturally be right here and right now. It has nothing to do with time. There's nothing to attain. There's nothing to perfect. There's just the question. And this is how I want you to think about this first basic application of the teaching, is more as a question. What happens when you allow everything to be as it is? So if you were to meditate, if you were to sit very still, quietly, and you were to ask yourself, what happens in this moment when I allow everything to be as it is? What occurs? What change in your inner experience happens? How does your view start to change? And not only what happens when you allow everything to be as it is, but also an inquiry of, am I allowing everything to be as it is? Because often there can be a state of stillness. But if you ask the question, am I actually allowing everything to be as it is, sort of a deeper layer of relaxation happens. You become conscious of more subtle ways in which you're holding on and grasping or trying to control. So look at this part of the teaching as a question more than an end that you're trying to attain. Don't try to attain allowing everything to be as it is. This would be a misunderstanding of the teaching. Take it as a point of inquiry, of exploration. Again, what happens when I allow everything to be as it is? And this literally becomes a form of meditation. Allowing everything to be as it is the deepest form of meditation there is, where the ego has completely let go into things as they are, into this moment as it is. Allowing you to be as you are, whether your mind is busy or quiet, whether you feel good or bad, whether you're anxious or at peace. Is it possible to allow this moment to be exactly as it is? And what happens? What begins to occur when you do? And to reiterate something I said at the beginning, you'll find by allowing everything to be as it is, that there is a natural state of stillness. This goes back to the teaching on be still. Allowing everything to be as it is a way of being still. And it is a way of noticing and recognizing stillness to be the very ground of your being. Stillness is an essential aspect of who and what you are. It's not a state that you attain. It's literally an aspect of who and what you are. So this is the first real application of the teaching. The second application is what I call inquiry. And inquiry is a bit more active and dynamic than the first, which is be still and allow everything to be as it is. The first application of the teaching just is an invitation to open and relax and to let go. The second application, inquiry, requires you to be a bit more dynamic, a bit more involved, you might say. Inquiry ties into that love of truth, that desire for reality. So inquiry is more of the dynamic aspect of the teaching. And ultimately, the deepest inquiry that we really can ask is, who or what am I? Who or what am I? Until we realize that, until we awaken from the dream of ego, then this is the most important question for us to really look at. Who or what am I? It's not so important who or what do I want, what am I hoping to achieve, where am I hoping to get, can I find God? All these questions are not as important as who or what am I, because of course it's you, it's the I, that's seeking everything that you've ever been seeking. And if you don't really know the truth of your own being, how can you know that anything else has validity? If you don't know who or what it is that's living your life right here and right now, if you don't really know what it is that's listening to my words and viewing this image, then you've missed out on the most important gift of your whole life, of your whole existence. So this inquiry into who or what am I is an essential part of this teaching. And like any part of this teaching, the application, how you apply this question, is essential. Because it can be applied in such a way that it's just something your mind does. In other words, if it's just something you think about, yeah, who am I? What am I? And you think about it and analyze it and compare what you've heard or read or what you're thinking. This is to misapply the teaching. It just leads to more thinking. It just leads to being lost in one's mind. But real inquiry is meant to help take you out of the mind, out of the creations, the dream state that the mind lives in. The question of who or what am I is a means to awaken from the dream state of egoic identification. So how does one ask this question? It's actually something very simple, but requires a real steadiness, a real precise understanding of how to apply this teaching. What am I? This is the question. So when you ask the question, what am I? You're really looking back into yourself. What is this thing called I or me? And most people, the first thing they notice is they have lots of thoughts about themselves, lots of memories, identities, good or bad self-images. Whether you're a man or a woman or a child or an adult, or you have a certain age or a certain birthday, or what you want or don't want, how you look in the mirror. All these things are contained in your mind. But if you look deeply, right now, as we are here together, if you really look deeply, you'll see that everything you've ever imagined yourself to be is just that. It's imagination. And it's something that's floating and being created in your mind. And that imagination, that mind, is something that occurs within awareness, within consciousness. So if the mind and the image you have of yourself is something that it occurs within you and to you, that means it can't be you, because you are something one step closer, as it were, than the mind. As we say, my mind, I'm thinking, that thought occurred to me. So the thinking and the me, the mind and the I, are two very different things. And this inquiry is actually meant to break this trance state between consciousness and the mind. It's meant to get your identity out of the mind. So when you apply this question, what am I really? And by seeing, you know that you are something more fundamental, more closer than the mind. Well, what's left if you don't go to your mind to tell you who you are? Some people would say, well, I feel this way. I have this feeling in my heart, or I feel this way, or I have such and such emotion. But again, feeling and emotion and sensation is something that arises within consciousness. It's noticed by consciousness. And so even though there may be a feeling, or a sensation, or an emotion, these don't define who or what you are either. They just tell you what's happening within your most intimate environment. But they don't tell you who or what it's happening to. So the question continues to go to a deeper level. What is this? What is this I that thought is occurring to, that feeling is happening to, that perception? What is this I that's hearing these words right now? What is the I that hears sounds? Who are you without referring to a thought or a feeling to tell you who or what you are? And if you really do this in a quiet way, in a meditative way, so that the question is referring you back to direct experience rather than to useless thinking, then this question has great power. But remember, this is the most important point. The question is meant to refer you back to a depth of experience, not meant to refer you back into thinking that you think about the question. This is a very, very important part of the teaching to remember. It's a very important part of the application of this question, so that it takes you deeper into the experience of what you are and out of the mind. So when you begin to realize that you are not the thoughts that go around in your head, you're not the thoughts you have about yourself. They're just conditioned. They're something you learned. You're not the feelings you have, or the emotions you have, or the sensations you have. All of this is occurring within the spaciousness of what you are. Well, what are you then? And at that point, if you follow it, if you look into this investigation in a very sincere and meditative way, you come to a stillness, a silence, because there isn't a verbal answer to this question. Any verbal answer you would come up with is the wrong answer. The answer is something that can only happen in the dimension of consciousness. Because when you really look, you begin to realize that if you're not your thoughts about yourself, and you're not what you feel, you begin to realize that you are the consciousness in which all those are occurring. And that's something that's extraordinarily powerful. And that consciousness, of course, is just a word too. If you were to get stuck with the word consciousness, then you would miss the whole point of this teaching. I can guarantee you that the direct knowing and experience of what you are is far beyond the word consciousness. But I have to use some words, so I use this word consciousness and I use the word spirit. Both of these are words that are used because what you and I are is not a thing. You can't reach out and grasp it. You can't measure it. You can't smell it. You can't touch it. It's ineffable. And yet, it's present. You can't deny that consciousness is present and functioning at this moment. Because even if you were to deny that it's present, your denial would be a proof that it's true. It would be a proof that you've heard my question. And that can only happen in consciousness and to consciousness. So this question, inquiry, is meant to take you beyond the mind, not into the mind. Very important. Very, very important. Who or what are you? And you can recognize that and realize that right now, because it's only in the now that this can be recognized. It doesn't require years of practice. It doesn't matter if you're brand new to spirituality or if you've been involved in spirituality for years and years or even decades. The availability of you awakening to your true nature as conscious spirit is always available now, in this moment, in any moment, but always and only in the now. It's not the result of long years of practice. It's the result of taking a good look right here and right now. Now, this inquiry can be taken in different ways. Another way that I suggest people use this inquiry is just the question, is it really true? Because your mind will come up with all sorts of things. The egoic consciousness is always imagining things and thinking things and acting upon ideas and beliefs and opinions that aren't really true. After all, a belief is just that. It's a belief. It's not a truth. It's just a belief. An opinion is just that. It's an opinion. Your mind has an opinion, but it's not really true. It's just an opinion. It's just a thought your mind has. A belief, it's just a thought your mind has. It's not really true. It's just a thought. And when we believe the thoughts in our heads, when we think that they have ultimate and true value, then we're in a state of delusion, because the thoughts in our head may have some practical usefulness in life, but they don't tell us what's ultimately real and what's ultimately true. So imagine this, that nothing that you imagine, none of your beliefs or opinions are ultimately real or true. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have a belief or you shouldn't have an opinion. Your mind will have them. But to see that they're not really true can be very, very liberating. The mind tends to want to grab onto thoughts and say, I must have thoughts, I must have beliefs, I must have opinions to be true. Why? Because the egoic state of consciousness, it lives in this world of beliefs and ideas and opinions. And ideas, beliefs, and opinions are what people the world of egoic consciousness. It's literally where you derive your worldview from. In other words, ideas, beliefs, and opinions about yourself or others or the world are literally the stuff, the substance of the dream state, of the egoic state of consciousness. And they cause you to be disconnected from the truth of your being, and the truth of every other being for that matter, and the truth of existence itself. So, inquiry can also be used at any moment. Is this really true? Is this belief I have really true? Do I really know that it's true, or is it a thought? Is this something I've assumed? Is it just a belief? And what if you saw through it? What if you saw through that thought and then didn't grab another one? Is it possible to see through a thought, to see through a belief, to see through a judgment or a complaint without grabbing onto a new one? I would suggest that to do so is vitally important for yourself and for all beings, for the alleviation from suffering and conflict, and to the discovery of a new and very profound state of love and compassion and gratitude. That there is a love and compassion and a gratitude, and there is a wisdom that far surpasses anything thought can come up with. And inquiry is a tool to access it. But again, it has to be applied in a very precise and simple way. The third basic application of this teaching is what I call conscious living. Now, conscious living really applies to something I talked about in the first of these two videos, the video about the basic principles of the teaching. Conscious living applies to something that I call awakened values. Now, in the first video I talked about awakened values, but I'll just quickly reiterate what they are. And they're most easily seen in contrast to what the egoic state of consciousness values, what it finds as valuable and worthwhile. Now, the egoic state of consciousness is based in separation. And being based in separation, it's also fundamentally fear-based. The egos are fundamentally fear-based because the ego sees itself as something separate and distinct from all other egos and from the world around it. And this causes the ego to feel separate and isolated to some extent, and to have an undercurrent of fear. Because the ego is this small thing existing within this vast, vast, vast universe. And this can only give rise to a certain amount of fear. So the egoic state of consciousness values separation, although it does so usually in a very unconscious way. It also values conflict, even though for some egos they don't think they're valuing conflict, but actually they are. Egos value victimhood, blaming, controlling. Egos are, by their very nature, very, very afraid of letting go of control, letting go of manipulation. They think, if I was to let go of control, I wouldn't get what I want, or I wouldn't get what I need, or I wouldn't be protected. Or maybe even worse than that, the whole world would somehow fall off its axis if you stopped controlling everything. So the ego holds as valuable things and ideas and beliefs that are rooted in separation. When I call these the values of the ego, I don't mean to suggest necessarily that they're moral values. There's just ways of being that the egoic state of consciousness holds as valuable and necessary. So we can contrast that with the values, again, not moral values, but what existence holds as valuable. Contrast this with the awakened values, which means that which awakened consciousness or spirit, what conscious spirit holds as valuable. And conscious spirit holds as valuable, just some of the things that conscious spirit holds as valuable is truthfulness. Truth it holds as a great value. What's real? What's really real in any situation, about anything? What's really real? Not, can I assert my opinion or my idea or belief? Can my opinion win the day? But what's really real and what's really true? This is a deep value held within consciousness, within spirit. Unity. This is another value within conscious spirit. Because conscious spirit sees that spirit is the underlying essence of all of existence. And therefore all of existence is ultimately unified. It's all of the same substance. It's all of the same suchness. And this is really the insight of which gives a great appreciation of unity. And so consciousness, conscious spirit values unity. It also values freedom, not only for oneself, but for all of existence. In other words, conscious spirit isn't going around life blaming and controlling everything and everybody. It doesn't value subduing anybody. It values freedom, freedom for everything and for everybody. Freedom for your own being and freedom for all beings. This is a value that's held within conscious spirit. Peace is another one. If human beings just actually valued peace, rather than speaking about it or just talking about it, but actually held the value of peace, then they would act from that value. They would manifest that in the way that they act and move in life. But so often we speak about peace, but we don't really act it and do it and move that way. And why don't we? Well, we don't do that when we have no consciousness of the truth, the essence of our existence. It's only when we have a consciousness of the essence of our existence as conscious spirit itself does peace naturally become a very high and true value for us, because it's a value that's within spirit itself. Gratitude is another one, the appreciation of what is, the appreciation of life, of existence, of anybody and anything, for just the way it is. From the standpoint of conscious spirit, nothing has to change in order for you to be happy. Imagine that. From the perspective of conscious spirit, nothing needs to change for you to be happy. From the ego's point of view, lots of things needs to change for you to be happy. The ego always thinks that the past needs to be different, the present certainly needs to be different, and the future needs to be different. And if all that was just different, then the ego says, I would be and I will be happy. But from spirit, happiness or gratitude is inherent within existence. Conscious spirit is grateful for what is. It sees the existential value of life and existence. Of course, another one of these values that is inherent within spirit is, of course, love. Love comes from the knowing, the realization, the experience of unity, that we are not different, that we are not separate, that we may be very unique in the human manifestation, but essentially we are one. And this realization gives rise to a great love of all being and all beings, a great intimacy with life, with existence. When we realize that life is a manifestation of what we are, that life itself, the hugeness, the immensity of life is a manifestation of your ineffable being as conscious spirit. This gives rise to a great love, a great and deep intimacy, a closeness, an experiential knowing and a feeling of great intimacy with each moment of your life and each being that's within it. And this love is something that spirit holds as a great value. Again, not a moral value, but as something that is valuable, that's literally a manifestation of who and what you are. So if you think of these awakened values as manifestations of who and what you really and truly are, truthfulness, unity, freedom, peace, gratitude, love, are actually not things you have to try to become. That's how ego sees it. But they're literally manifestations that leap right out of the center of the truth of your being. And so awakening through allowing everything to be as it is and inquiry, who and what am I really, is essential. And then becoming very conscious, again, not applying these from the outside, but discovering them from the inside, discovering these values, discovering that they are actually inherent within your true nature. To really explore in stillness and inquiry that your true nature as spirit, as consciousness, has these deep, what I call awakened values. And it's these values that dictate how conscious spirit moves and acts and responds. It moves from truthfulness and unity and freedom and peace and love. That's the ground from which it moves. It doesn't move from the ground of separation and fear and blame and control. It moves from the ground of truthfulness and peace and freedom and love and gratitude. Again, these are not values that the ego should be trying to carry necessarily. These, I'm speaking about something that's inherent in your true nature, waiting there to be discovered and then lived. This is what I call conscious living, to live out the values that are inherent within spirit itself. It becomes much easier when you realize that spirit is essentially what you are. And it becomes a blessing, not only to you, but to all beings. It becomes a blessing to this world. And it's an expression of true love. So these three are really the basic applications of the teaching. And as I said in the first video, that the basics are the most important. It's what people lose sight of. Everybody wants the most complicated things, the most subtle teachings. And although there are more subtle teachings than I've presented in this video, or on the other video on the basic principles of the teaching, it's the basics that are the most important. Everything, it's like a house. You have to have a foundation of a house, or the house collapses. So although there are more subtle applications of the teachings, maybe even more subtle principles, the basics are 98% of the teaching. People get a little spiritual experience and they think it's time for them to move on for the basics. But I can tell you, it's never move on from the basics. You never leave the foundation, because it's within these basics. It's within these fundamental truths and principles from which an incredible depth of subtlety and profound wisdom and love and spiritual realization is to be found. An ongoing revelation of truth and the sacredness of existence is to be found in these very, very, very basic teachings. So stay with the basics, and you'll find that they can take you to a place you never imagined, if they're applied with great honesty, great integrity, intention, and love. So thank you for joining me for this video, and I wish you very, very well.